Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you for those who have been able to join us live, and for those of you who are going to watch the recording, thank you for tuning in and listening to this recording. This is a webinar that is the start of many to come. This is the first webinar in a series that I'm going to present to support parents in our communities so that we can all work together to raise productive, successful but happy children who end up being these wonderful adults that we all want them to be. It's an important role that we have, isn't it, to be a parent. It's a big task and something that's not always acknowledged or something that you're thanked for. So I want to take this moment before we actually get into the session today to really talk to you about acknowledging yourself and what you already do as a parent, and congratulate you on reaching out and sitting in on the webinar today so that we can explore some different ways that we can work with our children. Because what we're aiming for is a happy, productive household, aren't we? One that flows, one that's calm, and one where everyone is happy and joyful. But it brings us to the point that sometimes as parents, we have to ask our children at least 100 times to do something. Why is that? Well, before we get started, I just want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves in this webinar. So could I ask you please to turn off your phone or put it on silent to make sure that there's no distractions, but also to take some notes along the way that might help. There's a lot of research around listening and note-taking at the same time helps to embed the ideas and helps your memory later on. So taking notes is always a good idea. So today we're going to talk about our belief systems that we have around parenting and around ourselves. We're going to look at what's happening in the brain, in the child's brain, when you're talking to them. And we're going to explore about parenting a little bit more and who you are as a parent and how you parent. I'll give you some takeaway tips. We'll talk about what's next. And at the end, we're going to have a little Q&A session that's just for you to ask and have any questions answered. So, who am I? Well, I'm Dr. Kathryn Murray. And you can see down the side there that I've got a list of qualifications, but the one that I put at the top was being a mother of 4. To me, that's my greatest achievement. I've raised 4 children. They were born within 5 years of each other, so they were all very close, and they are now all adults in their 30s, and they've grown into good people. And that's an achievement that I'm really proud of, that they're actually good people. I don't care too much about what job they've got or how much money they've got, but they're good people, and to me that's important. And I'm sure you as parents, that's what you're looking for as well. You just want your children to be happy and good people. So I work all over the world. I've done a range of different things. I work with early childhood educators and teachers in schools to set up their classroom design. I've been an expert in residence overseas in some international schools and worked with the children there and mentored the teachers. I've been on several parenting podcasts or interviews. I've written lots of articles, and you can see that I've worked with a range of different people across the world, and I love it. I love what I do, and I love sharing this information. Of course, one of the images there is me online with a group of people from India and globally, really, and that's the way things are now, aren't they? So I'm glad that you're able to tune in and we can share this webinar together. Alrighty. So what's going on in your child's brain? Well, you know, we know that the brain develops really quickly in the first 5 years of life. And in fact, when babies are born, they have a lot of neurons and a lot of synapses already in their brain, and they build more and then they're pruned off, and then more start again. So, you know that saying, use it or lose it? Well, it's a bit the same with the brain synapses. So we have these neurons in our brains, and in the neuron is this thing called a synapse, and the synapse comes together like this, and the message that you're sending your child goes from one side to the other like this, so it joins together. So we need to have this thing called myelination to make that effective And myelination is this jelly-like substance that joins those gaps together. So sometimes it's like that, but the myelination sits in and wraps this jelly-like substance around, so it pulls those synapses together so that the message goes from one side to the other. But because of that, young children have a short concentration span. They may not always tune in for the whole instruction, or they might not be able to focus for as long as you want them to focus. They are quite egocentric. That means that they think the whole world is all about them. And if you've got a young child, or I'm sorry to say, this kicks in again when they turn into teenagers, and puberty kicks in, where they think that the world revolves around them. The sun revolves around them. The whole household should revolve around them. And developmentally, that's just where they should be. That's how they're supposed to develop, because they're developing that sense of identity and that sense of self during that time. So being egocentric when they're young is really what it's all about. But they also have no empathy. So empathy means that young children can't walk in the shoes of someone else. So they can't fully understand the emotions or why other people do things, or why other people feel the way they do, because developmentally with their brain, they're just not capable of doing it. That myelination isn't thick enough, joining those synapses together to allow that to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that young children can't be kind, they can't be nice, they can't be happy. Yes, all of those things. But truly empathetic, no, they can't do that. Developmentally, they can't do that. And I've checked this with a neuroscience scientist, so I know that to be true, let alone all of the research I've done myself. So empathy usually kicks in around 7, when the myelination occurs in a thicker sort of way. So it develops around 7 years of age, and that's why at 7, children can be a little bit more receptive about how other people are feeling, people having hurt feelings, and supporting other people a little bit more. They're also better when they're working in a group situation when they're sort of 7 and older, because they've got that empathy, so they can understand what other people are saying a little more, and they can understand how people are feeling a little more. So what does this mean for us as parents? If that myelination is still developing, if there's lots of neurons still being developed, if there's a short concentration span, if children think the world revolves around them and they can't really put themselves into the shoes of others, what does that mean for us as parents? Once we understand what's going on in the child's brain, it's sometimes easier to work out how we manage that and what we do as parents. And that's what I want to get to in this session. So this is sort of what it looks like. If a message starts there on the left and you say, take your shoes off, put them next to the shelf, put your socks on top. So there's 3 instructions that you've given the child. So, okay, so they go, all right, I've got to take my shoes off, put my socks on top, and put them next to the shelf. That's 3 things. So they go over to the shelf, they sit down, they take their shoes off, and then they just walk off with their socks on and leave their shoes sitting next to the shelf, not in the shelf. And you think, why didn't they do what I asked them to do? A simple thing, take your shoes and socks off and put them on the shelf. But you see, for a young child, that's not an easy instruction. It's a 3-part instruction. You've given them 3 things to do in one action. So we have this thing occur that's called brain leakage, and that's when the message just drops out. So they may or may not be listening, but there's a fair chance that they just didn't get the message, that they got to take the shoes off. But when it got to the part where put your socks on top and then put them all in the shelf, that part of the message dropped out. And you've seen children go off to do something and then walk away and start doing something else. You've seen that happen, right? I have lots of times, and I'm sure you have too. That's when that leakage occurs, that they just forgot. They just don't remember that they were supposed to do that other thing. Now, that's because the myelin sheathing isn't thick enough in that particular part of the brain where that particular synapse was firing. The myelination down the bottom there, that jelly-like substance, needs to wrap around those, where those synapses join together a little bit more. And that comes with development and it comes with maturity. We can't rush that. We can't make that happen. And it's a waste of time getting upset with our child because they can't help it. Now, there's a fine line between not doing as you ask and brain leakage. So that's where you have to work out, are they just not doing what I've asked them to do, or did they not get the message? Did it not sink in? So there's a way around that. Just give them one instruction at a time. So the first instruction is, take your shoes off and wait. Let them do that. Then say, put your socks on top of your shoes. Now put them all in the shelf. So you're giving them 3 individual instructions, not 3 together. And that will make that brain leakage a little easier to manage. And it will give your child that feeling of success, that they've done what they've been asked to do, and everyone will be happy. So that's just one little tip for now. Be careful of the instructions that you give, the number of instructions, and how you give the instructions. So 90% of a child's brain's development happens before 5. That's a pretty big thing. So for us as parents, it means that we really have to structure the way that we're talking to our children and really structure that development of the brain so that we can encourage that myelination to happen. We can't change it. It's a developmental thing, but we can encourage that by giving children simple instructions. We know that the brain is developing quickly. If we give children open-ended materials, that means just a range of things that they can use at home or in the classroom, that is going to extend and develop those dendrites and the synapses that are growing in the brain as it develops in that first 5 years. Interestingly, that's also where a lot of our belief systems and values are developed. During those first 5 to 7 years, we start to understand about ourselves. We start to think a little bit more about who we are as people. We pick up on the energy of the people around us. We pick up on the tensions. We pick up on what's said and the different experiences that we have. And that's how our belief systems develop. Now, when we're talking to children, we need to remember that often they are operating in that bottom part of the brain, the instinctive part of the brain, the brainstem. And that's the survival part of the brainstem. It's fueled by that emotional part of the brain, the amygdala that sort of sits about here in your brain. That's the emotional side. So the emotions fuel what that child does. So it's that fight or flight response or freeze response. So if children are feeling threatened or they're upset, they'll want to just run away and not deal with the situation, or they might hit somebody or punch somebody, or they might just close down and say nothing. Fight, flight, or freeze. It's all related to the emotional brain and that survival instinct in the bottom of the brain, in the brain stem. Now, as children grow and develop, their maturity brings them up into this top part of their brain, the thinking part of the brain, the mammalian part. And that's where they can look at things rationally and problem solve and work out what they should do in a situation and what they're going to do for the best outcome. But when a child is upset, it's a waste of time trying to talk to them, talk to this thinking brain, because they're operating down here. They're still in the instinctive and emotional brain. They're still upset and angry or hurt or frustrated or whatever the emotion is. They're sitting in this lower part of the brain. So if you find that your child's having a bit of a meltdown, then deal with this bottom part of the brain before you start talking to them about it. So give them a cuddle, make them feel safe so that all of this cortisol drains out of the top part of their brain and they can start to relax. Or let them have some space on their own. Give them some time on their own. And that's not time out, time away. It's just cool down time, chill time, so that they can relax their brain and calm those emotions. So once that's calm, then you can talk to them about, that's not what we do in our family. We don't hit everybody in our family. When I ask you to do something, I want you to do it so that we can all get along in our family. That's when you can start thinking about them, when they can start thinking. So it's really important that we don't react and respond as the adult and to go into the, well, why did you do that? Tell me what was happening, and how are you going to fix this? They can't deal with that until they've calmed this bottom part of the brain. So security, cuddle, time alone or time away from the situation is a good thing, not as a punishment, just as a calm down time. Then we can do the talking and the thinking. Really important to do it in that order. We start at the base of the brain and work up when we're explaining and teaching children. Because what we want to do is we want to develop these different areas of the brain. And you can see in the first 3 years, this is just, it skyrockets, this whole developmental area, and it continues to develop all the way through to adulthood. So what's happening in this time is that working memory is being developed. Now, the working memory sits in this prefrontal cortex of the brain, and that's the memory of a phone number. And you just remember it long enough to be able to dial the number, punch in the numbers, and then you forget the number. That's a working memory. Or someone gives you directions to get to their house, and you remember it long enough so that you can get there. But then you can't remember how you got there the next time you go. So that's working memory, and that's what is developing as the brain develops over this period of time. Inhibitory control, that's self-regulation. That's being able to manage our emotions, which is what I was just talking about in the previous slide. As children develop, they start to be able to manage their emotions a little bit more. So they don't have to poke things. They don't have to touch everything that they see. They don't have to explode if something doesn't quite go right. So that's in inhibitory control. That cognitive flexibility is when you learn how to do something in one situation and you can transfer those skills to another situation. So for us, it might be learning to drive a car and then getting behind the wheel of a bus or a big truck. And we can adapt those skills that we learn in the car to use over here in the truck or the bus. That's cognitive flexibility. These are called the executive function skills, and they're an important part of maturity, of brain development, and it's also a very important part of how we parent. Because in those first 3 years and after, we know that developmentally children are starting to develop that working memory, so they can follow instructions for a short period of time because they have this working memory. So you ask them to do something and they'll do it. They may not remember the next time, so you might have to say it again. They're trying to manage their emotions. So we know that's the amygdala and the brainstem, trying to put those two things together. And cognitive flexibility. So they're starting to use that thinking part of the brain and move their thinking from one place to the next. So all of this is going on in your little person's brain. And in those early adult years, that's all happening as well, because everything's still being refined and perfected as the brain develops and we mature. So what's it mean for us? Well, it means our actions are driven by these invisible things. They're driven by our thoughts and our feelings. So what we think about our children and how we feel, and also with the children too, what they're thinking and what they're feeling, drives the actions, and then we get some sort of result. So it could be a good result, it could be a not so good result, or the action could actually be a non-action, like doing nothing, and then looking at the result. So we have these invisible things that mix with the visible actions and the visible results. And that's how parenting looks, but it's also drives children's behavior, because we can't see what they're thinking, and oftentimes we don't fully know how they feel because they're still trying to work it out themselves. They're often quite reactive, and if they're frustrated with something, they might throw a tantrum or they might throw something, but it's because they haven't got the ability to articulate what they want. So when you're going shopping, they can't say, oh, Mum, would you please buy me a packet of biscuits because I'm feeling quite peckish and I really need a sugar hit. They're not going to say that, are they? Because they don't have the ability to do that. So their actions might be to throw themselves on the floor and say biscuit. And then the result could be they either get it or they don't, or they get into trouble or they don't. You know, it depends. So it just goes around and around like that. But there are this combination of visible and invisible things that drive behavior. And when we look at it, what we see is only the tip of the iceberg when we're looking at a child's behavior. There's a whole heap of things that are going on underneath. The same with us. As a parent, we parent the way we do, but there's a whole lot of things going on below the surface for us. It might be a belief system about how you should be as a parent. It might be a belief system that you're not a very good parent, or you may have had experiences of very hard parenting when you were growing up, or easy parenting when you were growing up. It comes back to your own belief systems in your childhood, the things that you've seen, what you've experienced, and that all builds the picture of your own parenting. So that tip of the iceberg is what we see as a parent, how you parent, but there's a whole lot of things underneath. The same with your children. You see their behaviors and their actions at the top, but what's driving those actions? What's happening underneath all of that to make them do what they do, to make them say what they say? It's the same for us. So just a reminder, though, that we're trying to develop skills in our children, and it's up to them to develop their skills. It's up to them for their own brain development, to extend their opportunities for learning. So I really like this. If you put my socks on, for me, is your brain learning this skill or is mine? Just something to reflect on, I think, because, you know, because we love our children and we can get quite protective of our children, we try to do as much as we can for them, but that's not always the best thing for them. The best thing is for them to try it themselves. So there's around 4 ways that people parent. Sometimes there's a bit of a mixture between the ways, and that can be a little confusing sometimes for both the child and the parent. But there's 4 main ways. We're just going to run through them a little bit. So we've got the permissive way. So the permissive way of parenting. And by the way, I want to say before we go into this, there's no judgment here at all. So if you're, as we go through this, if you're reflecting on this and you're thinking, oh, that's me, oh, I don't want to be like that, or I do want to be like that, or yeah, I'm doing a really good job. Whatever you're feeling or thinking as we go through this, there's no judgment, because you're doing the best that you can do with the information that you've got, like we all do. And we've all been there. We've all had difficult times in our parenting. I have 4 children and they were born within 5 years of each other. So I was pretty busy. And I know many of you would have, you know, large families. Some of you have smaller families. But it's busy and there's lots of extra things that you're trying to juggle. There might be work, there might be partners, there might be outside interests, and there might be a range of different children situations. There might be socioeconomic areas that you're concerned about, other worries, other pressures, a whole stack of things that influence the way that you parent. So we're not going to judge any of that. We're just going to have a look at this and say, okay, well, these are the ways that people parent, and which box do I fit in mostly? Because we probably all won't be in one or the other, but which one do we mostly fit into? Is that the way I want to be, or do I want to try and change things and bring in some different aspects to my parenting? And that's okay. This is all just information. So the permissive style of parenting means that the child is the boss. So the child actually runs the house. The parent avoids confrontation. They don't want to get into an argument. They pretty much let the child have free rein. They let them do whatever they want. They're accepting. They have very low expectations about the level of control and the strictness of themselves. So they don't have a lot of boundaries. They are quite responsive to the children, but it's because they want them to be happy and they don't want any conflict. Now, an authoritative parent on the right-hand side is one that is a more democratic sort of parent. So they do have boundaries. They give the child power. They empower the child. The child doesn't have all the power. The parent empowers the child. There's a reciprocal backwards and forwards of respect. It's quite flexible, but the parent is quite assertive. And as I said, there's boundaries and there's routine and there's structure in the family. So the child knows exactly where they stand. Down the bottom, the uninvolved parent is the one that's just really busy. It's got lots of things going on and really doesn't have time to be fully involved with their child. So it can look as though they're not interested. It might look as though they just don't have time to be a parent. So the child might feel like they're on their own, that they can't really rely on the parent because the parent's off doing their own thing and too busy, and so they're on their own. So again, the child can do a lot of what they want to do without any of those boundaries or that strictness. Now, an authoritarian parent is a little different to the authoritative parent above it. Authoritarian is one that has strict rules. They're not terribly warm and they have that attitude, well, you need to do it because I said so. So they have power over the child and over the family. So the authoritarian parent is the boss, and that's the way they see their role in the household. Now, some of that may have sounded familiar to you, or some of it might sound like really foreign to you, and some of it might sound as though you're a bit of each at different times. So what we want to think about here is, what style of parenting do you use most of the time? So mostly, how do you parent? We all have times when we're tired and we might be uninvolved. We all have times where we think, oh, it's really not worth the argument because it's not a big deal. And so we slip into that permissive style and let the child make the decisions and choose what they want to do. And that's okay, as long as that's part of your plan and you're aware of that. Sometimes we have to be authoritarian and we just have to say, no, this is because I said so. But most of the time we need to be authoritative, because that's the way that children will learn, because you're modeling conversation, you're modeling high expectations, you're modeling these clear standards, the boundaries, and you can be flexible but assertive as well. So that's sort of where we want to sit most of the time. Now, when we parent, there's a lot of emotional development that's happening within your child. There's a lot of brain development, but there's also a lot of emotional development. As children grow and develop, they're starting to see who they are as people. They're starting to look at themselves in the world, and the biggest mirror is you. So how you see them is really important to how the child sees themselves. Now, in recent times, it's been publicised that there's parents called helicopter parents, and those helicopter parents literally hover over the child. Everything that they do, the parent is there, making sure that they're safe, making sure they're okay. So the child doesn't get a chance to take any risks and try out the boundaries and develop their own self-confidence, because the parents are always there hovering. Then we have the lawnmower parents. The lawnmower parents are those parents who sort of pave the way for the child. So there's no obstacles. Life's easy, cruisy, there's no issues. The parent goes before the child and makes sure that they're going to be invited to the birthday party. They make sure that they're going to have friends at school because they've made sure that some of their friends are going into the same class. Things like that can be the lawnmower parenting approach. It can just be parents being concerned and looking after their children, but when it goes too far, it takes that autonomy away from the child, so the child doesn't get a chance to have a few tumbles and have a few setbacks and be rejected and have that opportunity to build resilience, to be able to bounce back when something doesn't go right. Both the helicopter parent and the lawnmower parent, really prevents a child from becoming resilient and learning how to deal with disappointment in life. Now, the child that's bubble wrapped as well is seen as this fragile little object that can't take any knocks. So they too aren't able to develop that sense of resilience and that sense of strength and that sense of self-confidence. Their own self-concept is that they can't do things unless someone helps them with it, because they might get hurt or they might do the wrong thing. So as parents, we have to be mindful that we're not overprotective, that we allow our children opportunities to fall over and we help them get up and dust themselves off and move forward. That we allow children to have those times where they're bored, so that they have to think of something in their own mind rather than you think of something all the time and having them entertained. We don't want that. We want children to be developing their own thinking. So there's a few things that you can do to bring yourself closer to the authoritative parent approach. If you're not already there, if you feel that there's areas that you might want to work on. Have high expectations of your child. Assume that they're confident, assume that they can do things for themselves without being rigid and unforgiving. So if they make a mistake, or if they fail, or if they can't do things, that's okay. That's a learning opportunity. So we talk to the children about, well, what could we do next time? And yeah, it didn't work this time, so how are we going to fix it? And be reasonable. Have some rules, explain why the rules are there, explain what the consequences are if the rules are broken. You could have 3 rules in your house. One of them might be that you walk inside. You always frame that in a positive way so children know exactly what they're supposed to do. So one of the rules might be walk inside. Well, why do we have to have a rule like that inside? So explain the reason behind the rule and get them to buy into that so that they will easily abide by those rules. When we're communicating with our children, it's really important that we listen. It's not just our voice that we hear, it's the child's voice, and we listen actively. So that means you're making that eye contact, stopping what you're doing and actually listening to them. We teach that decision making. So whilst sometimes we have to tell our children what they need to do, try to involve them in that decision making. Ask them, what do you think the best thing would be to do here? Or how can we solve this problem together? Teach that responsibility too. It's the responsibility of your child to get their bag before they go to school in the morning. That's not your job. That's the responsibility of your child. And by giving them responsibility, you're also giving them the opportunity to build that confidence. So that's a really important thing to do. Allow them to do what they can physically do. So we're coming toward the end of our session, and I just want us to like reflect a little on what we do versus what we know. So what we know and what we do can sometimes be 2 different things. Often there's a little gap in the middle there, and that's that gap that we need to focus on. Think about the way we think about our parenting, think about what we do with our children, the way we feel about parenting, the way we feel about managing our children, and the type of actions that we take. So that knowing versus doing is there is a gap there. So knowing it and doing it are 2 different things. So if you know this information, or it's been a refresher for you, or you've revisited this information but you're not doing it, have a think about why you're not doing it. Is it easier not to do it? Is it because you'd forgotten about it? Or is it because this hasn't been modeled to you or explained to you before? Have a think about that. If you don't know this information, I hope that this has been good for you then, and maybe you can start putting in place some of the things that we've been talking about. So now a bit of a reflection time for you. I'm asking whether you recognised your child in any of the things that we've said during this period. Did you recognise yourself in the way that you parent? Did you recognise yourself in the way you speak to the children? Did you recognise the dynamic within your family? And did you get any surprises? Just something for you to have a bit of a think about. So as we draw to a close, I just want to give you a few of the tips from this session to take you from anxiety to calm in your family. You might want to jot these down. Notice your child's actions and remember that iceberg. Remember that everything that your child does, or you do for that matter, comes from a base that's hidden under the water. It comes from that invisible base that we talked about. So it might be your belief structure, it might be your culture, it might be your religion, it might be what you've experienced, it might be what's been modeled to you. It might be from your whole understanding about what it is to be a parent and what it is to be a child. So what drives the actions for your child? They might have some need that needs to be met. Perhaps they're tired, so they're acting out. Perhaps they don't understand what they've been asked to do, so they don't do it. So think about the actions and what's driving those actions. And the next one, remember to give those one-step instructions for little children. And then as the children get older, you can go to two-step instructions and three-step instructions. And that's probably enough for most people. So that's the take your shoes off. One instruction. Let them do that. Put your socks on top of the shoes. Put your shoes into the shelf. So there's three distinct instructions. Now, if you don't have time to stand there and say those three instructions, just give them one and be happy with that. As they get older, of course, and their brains develop and that myelin sheathing kicks in a little bit more, then you can give them longer instructions. This other one is a great one to allow children to get a really positive feeling about themselves and see themselves through your eyes. Spend 5 to 10 minutes a day with your child, with each child. If you have multiple children in your family, try and make some time each day, if not each day, each week, with each child individually on their own. And say to them, this is just your time and my time, just us, just for the next 10 minutes or so. Let's just, you and I, let's just go outside and look at the trees, just you and me. This is our time. And then at the end of that 5 or 10 minutes, say to them, oh, I've really enjoyed our time together. Thank you, and have a hug. It's a really beautiful way to make children feel special, particularly if there's lots of children in the family. But even if there's only one child in your family, it's an important thing so that they know that you've actually put some time aside just for them because they're important and they're worth it. And a bonus tip that I thought I'd give to you too is that children actually love boundaries and they love structure. Even when they complain and they whinge and they whine, they actually love it because it gives them some security. It makes them know where they fit in the world and they feel safe, they feel secure, and they actually want the boundaries as much as they complain. So I hope those tips are helpful for you with the research and the theory that's gone behind it. And there's another way now, if you want to continue with your learning, if you're interested in this, you can go to my website called Future Strong Education, and that's the link there. And I have a parenting program, a parenting course that I've written and developed that is some of what I've given you a little taster in this little webinar, and this is a bit more extensive in the course. So there's 3 chapters in the course. Each chapter has 3 different modules, and each module is only about 10 minutes long. You know, some of them I got a bit carried away with, and they're about 15 minutes long of video like this. And then there's a workbook that you can complete that goes with each one of those modules. At the end of the workbook, you will have a family action plan. So that it's helping you to identify what your family is going through now, what are the issues within your family, how you can talk to your children better, what does it mean for you as a parent, how you can develop different skills with your children, the language, the words to actually use with your child, how to identify the needs that they have when they're acting out, a whole range of things. And at the end of the workbook, you will have a range of tools as well. There's some meditation techniques, there's some affirmations, there's a range of different tools to support you in your parenting role. So there's 3 chapters, and in each chapter there's 3 modules. So 9 little videos, and then I've thrown in a bonus one as well. So there's actually 10 little videos that combine nicely with the workbook that we've developed. When you go to the website, look around along the top bar and you'll see courses COVID-19. If you click on that, you can go to another page and it will invite you to go to the course. For you right now, for the next 7 days, there's a coupon that you can use. There's a coupon code called Family. So when you click on the normal price of $97, it will take you to another page and you'll see Family. Click on Family and it will ask you for the code, and the code is Family. Put that in and you'll get $40 off the price of the course. So it's now $57 just for you because you've listened to this webinar. And that's my special gift to you to support you as parents if you would like to have some more information and extend your parenting skills. Now, I'm thinking that each one of those modules, by the time you listen to the video and complete the workbook, might be 30 minutes, and you can do it at your own leisure. There's no time frame. Once you have enrolled in the course is yours for however long you want it. And the workbook's yours too, that you can download and fill in as you go along the way. So I would really love for you to take advantage of this. This is, you know, a pretty good value, I believe, and just in time for Christmas, a nice Christmas present for you, because you may have your children home with you a lot more over these Christmas periods. So that's for you. I hope you enjoy it. I'd love your feedback too. If you want to drop me a line, I'd love to hear that. And this is the way to get in touch with me. You can find me on the website and send me a message through Contact Us, or you can send me an email through admin@futurestrongeducation.com. These are some of the things that I do throughout Australia and the world globally. I do a lot of parent group presentations, speak to parent groups. I do parenting workshops where we actually work on particular things and structure things together. I do professional development sessions for early childhood educators in early childhood centres. So, you know, that might be something that you could be interested in if your child is going to a centre and their staff is looking for some professional development. I can work with them in that area. Or if you're part of an early learning centre, I'm really happy to talk to you about ways that I can support you and your team. I do one-on-one coaching with parents and with educators, and I have a mentoring program that I work through with either parents or educators. I've got the online course that I've just shown you, and I'm writing some more, so there'll be more on the website soon. I do keynote presentations at a lot of different conferences. I do professional speaking at conferences, and I do that globally, and I do it online now as well as face-to-face where I can. So if you want more information about what I do, please reach out. Just let's have a chat. I don't bite, I promise. So if there's any questions now, and I don't think that there has been, I've sort of been monitoring the chat box while we've been chatting, and there doesn't seem to be any questions. So that tells me that the information has been okay for you. So you've been able to understand it. If you think of something later, feel free to send me an email. I'm more than happy to chat with you at a later date. So to finish off, I would just like to remind you that spending time with your child is the most important thing that you can ever do with them. You can never get back time, and that's the one thing that we can't replace. So spending time with your child is the most valuable resource. So I would encourage you to do a little bit of this yourself. Go outside with your child and just lie on the grass or lie outside and spend some time just looking at the clouds as the clouds go across the sky. It's a great relaxation technique. It's a great meditative technique, but it's also a beautiful opportunity for you just to spend time with your child. maybe when you're spending that special 5 or 10 minutes with each one of your children, maybe this is something that you might like to do. I'm just going to put this screen up again in case you want to contact me. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope you found this really interesting. As I mentioned, we're going to do a series of these webinars, so keep an eye out for the next one. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks' time. Look through the social media platforms, which is probably how you found me today. So have a great week, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.